What if you could work just 1 day a week, but achieve more than you currently do in 5? It sounds like a ridiculous fantasy, doesn't it? A promise from a late-night infomercial. But this isn't about magic. It's about a hidden law of the universe that is quietly shaping your life every single day. In fact, you're probably wasting about 80% of your time, your energy, and your money. And the strangest part is, it's not entirely your fault. It's just the way things are. To understand what I mean, take a moment and think about your wardrobe. Picture all the clothes hanging in your closet or folded in your drawers. Now be honest. How many of them do you actually wear on a regular basis? If you are like most people, you probably have a few favorite items. That one comfortable sweater, that perfect pair of jeans, those go-to shirts. Chances are, you wear about 20% of your clothes, 80% of the time. The rest just sits there. This strange imbalance isn't a coincidence. It's a demonstration of one of the most powerful and counterintuitive principles of productivity and effectiveness ever discovered, the 80/20 rule. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The story of this principle begins not in a boardroom or a laboratory, but in a quiet vegetable garden in Italy in the late 19th century. An economist and sociologist named Vilfredo Pareto was tending to his pea plants. As he harvested them, he noticed something peculiar. A small number of his pea pods, the vital few, were yielding the majority of the peas. Specifically, he observed that about 20% of the pods were producing about 80% of his total harvest. This was a curiosity, an interesting little pattern in his garden. But Pareto was a man who looked for patterns everywhere. He wondered if this imbalance applied to other things. He turned his attention to his field of study, economics. He analyzed the distribution of land ownership in Italy, and was stunned by what he found. Approximately 80% of the land was owned by just 20% of the population. He checked other countries, and then other periods in history. The pattern, this 80/20 split, kept appearing again and again with uncanny consistency. This discovery became known as the Pareto Principle, or more simply, the 80/20 rule. The core idea is this. In many situations, roughly 80% of the results or outputs come from only 20% of the causes or inputs. It is a principle of imbalance. It tells us that not all effort is created equal. Some things you do are vastly more important than others. Once Pareto pointed it out, people started seeing this lopsided reality everywhere. In business, it's a foundational concept. 80% of a company's profits often come from 20% of its customers. 80% of sales are generated by 20% of the sales team. 80% of product complaints relate to 20% of the product's flaws or bugs. It dictates which customers to focus on, which products to promote, and which problems to solve first. But this goes far beyond business. Look at your own digital life. Open your smartphone and scroll through your apps. How many do you use every day? You might have dozens, even hundreds of apps, but you likely spend 80% of your time on just a handful of them. Your messaging app, your social media, your email, your browser. 20% of your apps get 80% of your attention. Think about language. Any language consists of hundreds of thousands of words. But studies show that learning the most common 2,000 words will allow you to understand about 80% of everyday conversation. 20% of the vocabulary delivers 80% of the comprehension. It applies to our social lives too. We may know hundreds of people, but we likely derive 80% of our joy, support, and meaningful connection from just 20% of our relationships, our close family, and our dearest friends. It's in society where 20% of criminals commit 80% of crimes. It's on our roads where 20% of the streets handle 80% of the traffic. It's even in our own happiness, where 20% of our experiences will likely generate 80% of our cherished memories. The universe, it seems, is not a fan of even distribution. It favors the vital few over the trivial many. Now, before you start measuring everything in your life, it's important to clear up a few misconceptions. The numbers 80 and 20 are not a rigid scientific law. They are a rule of thumb, a guideline. Sometimes the split is 90/10ths or 70/30ths. The point isn't the exact numbers. The point is that a massive imbalance exists between input and output, effort and result. The two numbers also don't have to add up to 100. For example, it might be that 1% of your time produces 50% of your results. The principle is simply an observation that the relationship between cause and effect is rarely, if ever, a 50-50 split. And most importantly, the 80/20ths rule is not an excuse for laziness. It's not about cutting 80% of your work and going home early. It's about being strategically smart. It's a tool for ruthless prioritization. It's about shifting your mindset from being busy to being effective. Being busy is doing more. Being effective is doing more of what matters. So how do we make this powerful principle work for us, instead of just being a cool fact to mention at a party? The process involves two key stages: analysis and action. Let's make this practical. Imagine a freelance graphic designer named Clara. Clara feels constantly overwhelmed. She works 10 to 12 hours a day, feels chained to her email, and always feels like she's falling behind. Her passion for design is fading, replaced by burnout. She feels busy, but not productive. Clara decides to conduct an 80/20ths audit of her work life. For 1 week, she tracks everything she does. She uses a simple notebook and logs her time in 30-minute blocks. What tasks is she doing? Which clients is she working for? At the end of the week, she analyzes the data, and the results are shocking. First, she looks at her income. She discovers that 3 of her 15 clients, that's 20%, account for roughly 85% of her total revenue. These are her vital few clients. Coincidentally, these are also the clients whose projects she enjoys the most and who value her creative input. The other 12 clients, the trivial many, take up a huge amount of her time, with endless small revisions and administrative back and forth, but contribute very little to her bottom line. Next, she analyzes her time. She finds that 80% of her day is spent on low-impact activities, answering non-urgent emails, creating minor social media graphics that get little engagement, and attending calls that could have been an email. Only 20% of her time, a precious 2-hour block in the late morning, is spent on deep work, the challenging creative design that wins her major projects and builds her reputation. In that moment, Clara realizes she hasn't been running a business. She's been running on a hamster wheel. She has been giving equal weight to every task and every client, when in reality, their value was wildly unequal. Now comes the second stage, action. This is about amplifying the 20% and minimizing the 80%. First, Clara focuses on her vital 20% of clients. She makes it a priority to deliver exceptional service to them. She reaches out to them proactively, asking about their future needs. She dedicates her best creative energy to their projects. This strengthens her most valuable relationships and leads to more, better work from them. Second, she protects her 20% of high-impact time. She blocks out 2 hours on her calendar every single morning for deep creative work. During this time, notifications are off. Her email is closed. She tells her clients this is her dedicated focus time and that she will respond to messages afterward. This is non-negotiable. Third, She addresses the trivial 80% of her workload. She can't just ignore everything else, but she can be smart about it. For the low-paying, high-maintenance clients, she politely raises her rates when they next approach her. Some leave, which frees up her time. Others agree to the new rate, which makes them more valuable. For the endless stream of emails, she sets up templates for common inquiries and only checks her inbox 3 times a day, instead of every 5 minutes. She automates her invoicing with accounting software. She eliminates the tasks that yield almost no results, like posting on social media platforms that bring her no clients. The transformation is not instantaneous, but within a month, Clara's life is different. She is working 8-hour days, not 12. Her income has actually increased because she has more time to serve her best clients and even take on one more high-value project. Most importantly, her passion for design is back. She feels in control, effective, and fulfilled. She stopped celebrating being busy and started celebrating being productive. Clara's story is an illustration of what's possible when you apply the 80/20 rule as a practical tool. You can do the same. Start by asking yourself some hard questions. In your job, which 20% of your activities contribute to 80% of your success and positive results? In your personal life, which 20% of your relationships bring you 80% of your joy? In your health, which 20% of your habits, like sleep, a certain type of exercise, or healthy eating, produce 80% of your well-being? In your learning, what are the 20% of concepts that will unlock 80% of the subject? Answering these questions requires honesty and a little bit of analysis. You might need to track your time for a few days, or simply take some quiet time to reflect. But the clarity you will gain is priceless. Once you identify your vital few, the path becomes clear. Your goal is to obsess over that 20%. Give it your best time, your best energy, your best focus. Then, find ways to eliminate, automate, delegate, or simply spend far less time on the 80% of things that don't really move the needle. This is the art of strategic negligence. It's the permission to not care as much about the things that don't matter as much. It's the realization that being good at everything is not as effective as being truly excellent at the vital few. The 80/20 rule is not a trick, it is a lens. It's a way of looking at the world that helps you separate what is truly important from what is merely urgent or present. It's a call to find your pea pods, the ones that contain most of the peas, and give them the attention they deserve. So look at your week ahead. What are the few things that will create the most significant results? What is your 20%? Find it, cherish it, focus on it, and watch as you reclaim your time, your energy, and your life.